Hey guys, I'm Mr. Mills, and today we're going to be reviewing intercepts. So, an intercept in mathematics is where a line or the line of an equation crosses the x or the y axis. Okay, so graphically, in this case, this blue line here crosses this x axis. Let me even label that. This is the x-axis, the horizontal one, and the vertical one is the y-axis. Because this blue line crosses the x-axis and the y-axis, that means it has both an x-intercept and a y-intercept. Okay, now the question is, where are those intercepts at exactly? What point are they? Okay, so I'm going to lay out a few tips on how to find an intercept rather quickly. So, a few characteristics of intercepts. First of all, to find an x-intercept, when I'm finding an x-intercept, that means a couple things. First of all, that means where it crosses the x-axis, where it crosses the x-axis. Okay, so over here on this blue line, this crosses the x-axis. The x-axis is the horizontal one, the sideways one. It crosses the x-axis at this point, meaning this is an x-intercept. Okay, and I'll get to how to answer that correctly. Another characteristic I would like to point out, and probably the biggest one, is the fact that at an x-intercept, at this x-intercept right here, the value of y is always 0, right? And why is that so? Well, the x-intercept is kind of like right in the middle of the graph, I think of it, like if you think in terms of it either being up or down, like the top half of the graph or the bottom half of the graph. This point is neither in the top half nor is it in the bottom half, right? It's like right in the middle. So the value of y right here is 0, and it will always be 0 at the x-intercept. Okay, so y equals 0. Now, I have similar points for the y-intercepts. Y-intercepts, that is where the graph crosses the y-axis, right? Okay, so again, on this blue line here, the y-intercept would be right here, where the graph crosses the y-axis. Okay. And then also, probably the most important one, when we're finding y-intercepts, that means the x is always going to equal 0. Right? It's like the opposite of what you would think. To find the y-intercept, your x is 0. To find the x-intercept, your y is 0. Okay, so these are like my few tips in finding x and y intercepts in 3 different ways, really. With a graph, with an equation, and with a table. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start, and I have this one example here, and I'm going to try to find my x and y intercepts on this blue line here. So, to me it looks like my x-intercept, remember my x-intercept is the one where it crosses the x-axis. So I'm looking at this right point here, right, where it crosses the x-axis, and what is that point there? What is the x value there? How many units do I have to go over from the center of the graph, from the origin? I have to go over 1, 2, 3. Okay, so this point here, I went over 3, and then my y value of course is always going to be 0. So 3 comma 0 in parentheses because that intercept is an actual point on the graph. Okay, and then to find my y-intercept, that's this guy right here. So it looks like that is at, it's definitely at 0 because the x is always going to be 0. And then the y value is at -1, -2. -2. Okay, so now we have found both of our intercepts for this top graph here. Now, for this equation, keep in mind this is a completely separate problem, right? Completely different from the first one. For this equation, I think this is also going to have an x-intercept and a y-intercept. Now the question is, how do we find each one of those? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to recall back to some of those tips that I pointed out earlier, and those are these. When I'm finding an x-intercept, I know that the y must equal 0. Right? So I can use that information to my advantage. So hey, let's first find our x-intercept, and what do I know? Well, I know that the y is going to equal 0. Okay, so let's take this equation and let's find that x-intercept. To find that x-intercept, I know y needs to equal 0. Y equals 0. Okay, so let's take out that y there and replace it with 0. Right? So let's get 8x minus 4 times, instead of having 4 times y, we'll have 4 times 0. 4 times 0, and that equals 16. I think this is going to be pretty easy to simplify, right? Because what's 4 times 0? Well, it's just 0, right? So that part of the equation just kind of goes away. So I really just have 8x equals 16. Okay, and now this is just a smaller equation that we've dealt with many times before. Okay, so how do I get x by itself? X is an introvert. X wants to be alone during COVID-19. Okay, so let's go ahead and divide by 8. And divide by 8, so I get x equals, what's 16 divided by 8? Well, it's 2. Okay, so that's one of my answers, 2. So my x-intercept is then 2, 0. Okay, and then how do I find my y-intercept? Well, my y-intercept, hey, let's use this same little bit of information here, right? Y-intercept, x equals 0. Use that to your advantage, okay? So let's take this equation again. Let's take that equation and let's make x equal to 0. Oops. Let's make x equal to 0. So I have 8, and instead of having x there, I'm going to replace that x with 0. So 8 times 0 minus 4y equals 16. Okay, and then this is nice because 8 times 0 again is just 0. So really, instead of having this minus 4y, I really just have negative 4y because that 8 times 0, since it's just 0, it just kind of goes away. So I just have negative 4y equals 16. Okay, and then just one more little step here. Y is an introvert here. Y wants to be alone. I got to get rid of that negative 4. How do you undo multiplication? Well, let's go ahead and divide by negative 4, both sides. And so I get y equals 16 divided by negative 4 is negative 4. Okay, so my y-intercept is 0, negative 4. Okay. All right, now one last little type of problem we might get to is something where you would have just a table like this, right? Where I have a bunch of x values and a bunch of y values, and I'm being asked to find only one of my intercepts usually. Okay, so here I'm only asking for the y-intercept, right? So I just want to know when x equals 0, what is the value of y, right? And so I'm trying to think. I have 3 different points here, right? This is a point, this is a point, and this is a point. I'm trying to think, for which one of these points does x equal 0? Okay, well, it's pretty easy to see that none of these, there's no 0 in here anywhere, right? I have a 20, a 15, and a 10, but I don't have any zeros, right? So I need to somehow find this box here. I need to find an x value that is 0. Right? And once I have that, then I can find my y value. Okay, so how do I do that? Well, I need to find out when does this column equal 0? When does the x equal 0? And so I'm trying to think, if I were to continue adding more points in here, I'm thinking eventually I would get to 0. Right? That makes sense. If I kept adding more points in, eventually I would get to 0. I don't know when, but somewhere down the road I would. So I'm thinking, should I go up or down? And by that I mean, should I go from 10 to 15 to 20 and then keep going up like that? Or should I go from 20 to 15 to 10 and keep going down like that? Which way is going to get me to 0? Right? And I think I'm seeing that if I went down, right? If I went from 20 to 15, that's subtracting 5. And then if I went from 15 to 10, well, again, that's subtracting 5. And so I'm thinking, I'm getting closer and closer to 0. So let's start going down. Okay? What's my next number here? If I take 10 and I'm subtracting 5 again, what am I at? Well, 10 minus 5 is 5. Right? And I need that to be 0, so I'm going to have to go one more. Okay, so let's make another little box here. I'm going to have to go one more, I think. Subtract 5. And 5 minus 5, of course, is 0. So I'm good with my x. Unfortunately, I'm not completely done. I've only done half of the problem so far, because I still have to find out that y value right there. Okay, and to do that, first I have to find out that y value right there. Okay, so how do I do that? How is my y changing? Is it going upwards or downwards? Positive or negative every time, right? So let's think. Since I moved downwards with my x, I'm going to do the same thing with my y's, right? I'm going to go downwards. Okay, so from 41 to 39, what am I doing to get from 41 to 39? Well, I think I'm subtracting 2. Right? Because 41 minus 2 is 39. Okay, and then 39 to 37, again, subtracting 2. Makes sense. Okay. So what's the next number after 37? What's 37 minus 2? I think 37 minus 2 is 35. Okay, and is that my answer? Well, heck no, it's not, because I need this guy right here, the very last one. What's 35 minus 2? It is 33. Okay, so my final answer then would be 0, 33. 0, 33. Okay, and that is my y-intercept here. Now, I'm not worried about my x-intercept. However, you could find it. I think it would end up being a decimal, but that's okay. Okay, so that's like a quick review of intercepts. I hope that this helps you. If it does not, please reach out to me, and I would love to assist you in any way that I can. Thank you guys for watching, and always remember, Maroon Pride.